Welcome back. You tuned into Mid Morning Talk with me, your host Marim Mia, only on Salam Media. And I have joining me is Director of the Center for Early Childhood Development, that is Professor Eric Atmore. And we're going to be discussing the migration of early childhood development centers to the Department of Education, where they will be integrated as part of the Department of Education portfolio. And Professor Eric Atmore is well experienced in terms of early childhood development, understanding it, even developing structures within formalized structures for early childhood development centers as early as 1994. So very, very knowledgeable on the subject and understanding, because the Center for Early Childhood Development is now a quarter of century and still going strong, 25 years. So we congratulate him on his sterling work in this field, and such an honor to welcome Professor Eric to Mid Morning Talk. Welcome, Professor. Good morning.
Mariam, good morning to you. Nice to see you again, and good morning to your listeners.
Thank you. So, Professor, last week, I'm also in this field in terms of before I got to presenting, I also have honors degrees in early childhood development. So this is my passion as well. So yes, with keen interest, I read about the migration now being formalized. Dates have been set for 2020 for grade R, as well as a grade double note or grade double R, what you may want to refer it to be part of compulsory education, a time frame 2030. So tell me, what are your feelings regarding this migration, as well as government's capacity? Is it too premature to put the date as 2020, or is it all system go?
Mariam, you ask a very good question. I think, it's very early to make any judgment calls on whether it will be successful or not. But I think we must give the Department of Basic Education the opportunity. Certainly, the Department of Social Development has not been very good in implementing and rolling out ECD across South Africa. So it's far too early to tell whether it will work. The implementation date was originally 1 April 2021. As you know, this is gone, and the target date is now 1 April 2022. That in itself is going to be difficult, but I think the early childhood sector and the grade R sector will be very, very pleased to come on board and assist government in getting it rolled out.
And what I also, previously early childhood development centers, each center sort of had their own curriculum, own syllabus within that. And some of them were just centers of daycare where parents who were forced to go to work and they had no one to look after the kids. So it was more like a drop off. That was more just what we call, the term you use is crash in terms of that. So the focus is more on childcare, that they don't get hurt, they in a safe environment, than education itself. So has the department now, are they in a process, or I would think it's done already? Do they have a formalized curriculum now in terms of what are the unit standards there? What are the learning outcomes? What should be taught at what age in terms of development, in terms of life skills? Has that, is there some a team working together on that in terms of a formalized syllabus, universal syllabus for everybody in early childhood development centers?
You are quite correct. In the early days, I'm talking about decades ago, the education component was neglected, and early childhood development centers were called creches, as you indicated. They were called daycare centers. They were called educare centers. And the primary reason was childcare, or the primary purpose was childcare. That has changed drastically over the years as the research evidence around the world has been forthcoming. The National Department of Basic Education has got a grade R curriculum framework, and there is also the pre-grade R curriculum framework. So we are there. The weakness is...
Professor, can you hear me? We seem to lost Professor momentarily. Let me just check with Nazreen if she can raise them. But while we trying to raise while we're getting the professor on a clear line, let's let me just read out something. So basically, the government has said that there's going to be a migration from Department of Social Services to Department of Education, and then we know that grade R is going to be compulsory in the year of 2020. What we're going to do is, Nazreen says we need to take a short ad break while she's trying to raise Professor on a clearer line. So let's just do that, and then when we come back, we're going to continue our discussion. Yes.
We have a bit of a situation.
Head on over for the Taste with Kick. We offer something scrumptious for everyone in the family. Wraps, chicken tikka, burgers, tender grills, mocktails, milkshakes, and so much more. Corporate and events catering available. Visit our social media pages for more info or call 031 209 0119. Kiki's, the Taste with Kick.
The combined dam levels for the Port Elizabeth area is at a shocking 11%. 1 July is day zero for the Kucha Dam, resulting in dry taps for hundreds of families in the surrounding areas of Port Elizabeth. Help us strategize. Support our water drive in the Eastern Cape region of South Africa. Donate your lilla towards the erecting of JoJo tanks in impoverished areas and for the vehicles to deliver water in areas of need. Donate to the Al-Fida Foundation. Visit our website at www.alfida.co.za or contact us at 041 484 1288.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
Welcome back. Yes, I think we've got Professor Eric back on. Professor, are you back with us? Professor, can you hear me?
I could see you all the time. Yeah, yes, I can.
Okay,
and
you
I
can
could
go.
see you all the time.
Oh, all right. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we just couldn't hear you. There was a freeze on our screens for a while, but you can go ahead. You were we got cut off while you were telling us there is a framework for grade double notes as well, because grade R, we're all aware that, I mean, most schools have grade R as part of the offering now within the school community as well, and it's a lot more formalized. As you said, there is a framework and a syllabus, but we were speaking about the grade double notes and maybe the grade triple notes.
Yes, there is a curriculum for grade R and for the years before grade R. It's been constructed by experts in early childhood development, and I'm very confident in the quality of the material. The real test, though, is most of our early childhood development centers are in poor and decimated communities. And we have to get that curriculum and the materials that go with it in those ECD centers. Otherwise, it's just going to be another curriculum or framework which is not implementable. So I'm very, very happy that we have that quality of curriculum, and we now just need to get it implemented.
So, Professor, for me, that is always the vacuum or the gray area is we have fantastic frameworks across the board in all government departments in terms of when people actually develop these frameworks in theory, but then something is lost between the implementation. There's not enough. There's a problem with the rollout, a problem with training. It's always the case. Now, I'm looking at in terms of that's for me a concern will be the implementation. Furthermore, when I when you look at the requirements in terms of being a early childhood facilitator or educator, to call it that, I mean, if you go for a 6-month course in ECD, many of these small training centers are offering 6 months courses, and then thereafter you have a certificate, and then that certificate makes you eligible in terms of being in an ECD center. And now that the focus is going to be on the educational part on the center, what does that imply? Definitely we'll need to upskill those facilitators, or will additional separate facilitators be required to be employed then when it comes to the education component? Or how are we going to bridge this gap for me in terms of them? Because clearly with that 6 months or even a year of training is not adequate. You and I both know these are the developmental years. Even when it comes to barriers of learning, at this stage, for those trained professionals, you can actually correct and remediate those problems at this stage just because it's the developmental stage. So if you can just explain to us in terms of upskilling staff in these centers.
Mariam, again, you got the story correct. The overwhelming majority of adults who work with young children are either underqualified or they are unqualified. Now, that's not their fault. That's a function of our political history and of the inequality that we see. We have about 1 million children in each age group. So there are 1 million 5-year-olds, 1 million 4-year-olds, 1 million 3-year-olds. If we're going to get young children into early childhood development centers and into grade R, we need skilled teachers. We need the buildings, we need the equipment, we need the management skills. But most important is we need highly competent teachers. And there's a general belief that the younger the child, the more skilled the teacher needs to be. Government has drawn up minimum requirements for teaching in grade R and pre-grade R, but it's going to take decades to get to a point where all those adults working with young children are qualified. Our training output across the country each year is fewer than 5,000 teachers, and we need much more. So again, while the framework is there and the policy is there, the implementation is not there. And that's going to be our biggest challenge, to get every adult that works with a young child suitably and appropriately qualified, because that's the critical element in the learning for that child.
Professor, we tried in vain to raise somebody, a representative from both the Department of Education and Department of Social Development to add to this conversation, to actually provide them the platform, and in terms of also fairness, in terms of understanding from them. But Department of Education said for now, we should contact Department of Social Development, and they then said actually the questions we were asking, it's for Department of Education. So there's just this back and forth, and hence I wasn't able to successfully raise anybody there. But in terms of have you any knowledge in terms of how is this proposed migration going to be? Will all those early childhood development centers, will they have to re-register now, or will this database from the Department of Social Development be then forwarded to Department of Education, or it's going to be a re-registration process? Are there going to be additional criteria then from the center? Because as you've said before, it was social development, and there was a big component was the K, the nurturing in K. And now under Department of Education, it's going to be a formalized framework, educational framework that will start much earlier in a child's life in terms of educational intervention. So I'm just trying to understand this migration process. Have you had any engagements to understand how this migration process is going to take place?
Mariam, one of the huge weaknesses in early childhood development in South Africa is our evidence and the data that's available. There's minimal data. We know how many children are born each year, and we know the number of children in each cohort. But more than that, we know very little. We don't have a audit or survey of all the ECD centers in South Africa. The last one was done in the year 2000, the last full audit. There was a survey in 2013, but it was a partial survey. I think the way the migration is going to work, from what I've been told by the Western Cape Education Department, is that the full totality of ECD centers will be transferred to the Department of Education. That means all the staffing, all the funds, and all the information on grade R and early childhood development will move across to basic education. That information and that data then needs to be checked, corroborated, and confirmed. But if you look at it from the Department of Basic Education's view, let's take the Western Cape. 52 staff are going to move from social development across to education. That means, let's say 20 officers need to be found. Their salaries and the money needed to pay them, that needs to be transferred from National Treasury, from social development to education. Now, all of this takes a huge amount of time and can be complex. That's why I think the migration date of 1 April 2022, even that is ambitious. But it's a huge logistical task in the Western Cape, which is the best functioning of the 9 education departments. I am really worried about how this is going to happen in the Eastern Cape, in Limpopo, and in those provinces where the administration is not that strong.
Yes, because I think that is the question many are asking. In fact, early childhood development centers themselves, they begin to panic because this came out on the news. This is said 2020, but they are in the dark in terms of what the migration process be. To start it, they wouldn't want to be falling foul of the law in terms of they not meeting requirements and things like that. So I think a lot of confusion. Then I've read articles where many NGOs require transparency in terms of what is this migration going to cost government as well, and where is this funds going to come? Because the thing is, this whole migration process is basically an administration process, and while there's much needed funds for equipment, so where is this budget going to come in? Then that's I think for ECD centers yourself, that is the greatest need in terms of educational resources, especially when it comes to ECD. You require numerous resources in terms of developing a child, in terms of teaching aids and learning aids as well. So I think that was another question in terms of, does the government have the financial capacity as well to oversee this migration, and then as well provide these centers with the necessary educational resources and equipment?
The early childhood centers have been left out. There's a huge information gap. And across the country, there are some 32,000 ECD centers that are asking the question, how is this migration going to affect me? Because they have to prepare themselves and they have to be ready. What we need is a large-scale national communication program from basic education to ECD centers, where government informs ECD centers exactly what's happening, why it's happening, and what the various steps are. I think at the back of all this, the migration will only work if there is the political will. That means that government wants it to happen. If it's just something that they're doing without the political will and without the president taking the lead, no one else, the president must take the lead, as he's done with COVID-19. So we also then need public officials in basic education to take on the task and do it with enthusiasm. Now, in some provinces, the skills are not there, the enthusiasm is not there, and that's a big bother. And then, as you said, where's the funding going to come from to make this a reality, to make it successful? So those three things: political will, the competency of public officials, and funding, that will make the migration a success or a failure. I think on the ground, those 180,000 women predominantly who work in ECD centers, they will make it work. Our communities are top class, excellent when it comes to the care of children, but they have to have the support of government, of trade unions, of non-profit organizations, and of business to make it work.
Professor, thank you for this insightful discussion. I'd like to get you on to lend your experience in terms of actual child development, to offer advice for us in the future for parents in terms of what they can do in terms of intervention to give their children that head start and as they journey towards a responsible adulthood. So I'd like to get you to speak about this actual early childhood development programs and interventions, as well as advice in the future. But thank you so much for joining us and giving us of your time. Much appreciated. Enjoy your morning, and may you be under the mercy and protection of the Almighty.
Mariam, thank you very much. And you know, Salam Media is a wonderful supporter of young children.
We seem to leave Professor there, Professor. And yes, acknowledging that Salam Media is a supporter and a provider platform of young children and all humanity. So may we continue to serve as that platform. Well, let's take for a short break, and then we're going to be speaking to the head of Liberty firefighters regarding their court victory and their court judgment, all this after the break.